All right, welcome. Tonight is our roundtable discussion. We're going to be talking about public schools and nature-based programs or nature-based approaches. And I'm super excited to be joined by Ricardo, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in a moment. But I, what spurred the idea to hold this tonight was I was featured on Ricardo's podcast, and we had this great conversation sort of about my own journey as a primarily public school teacher and my passion for bringing nature to children. And so I had such a fun time having that dialogue with Ricardo. It was just between him and whoever happens to listen to it. I chatted with Ricardo and said, wouldn't it be great to have more of a dialogue? And so we put out the information just a couple weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, and 30 people signed up who were interested. And about half of them wrote down if they were going to be in the spotlight for 3 to 5 minutes, well, what would they want to talk about? And so I've got my list here with people's names, and those of you who wanted to speak, I definitely want to hear from you all. But let me just hand it over to Ricardo for a moment and have Ricardo introduce himself.
Well, hello. You already kind of introduced me for the most part, but I've run wilderness programs and nature education, what I call forest education now. Back when I was doing it, it was all like wilderness survival and bushcraft. For about 35 years, we started in like 1987 or so, running programs, and then my first summer camp that I ran was in '89, and we pretty much have run a multitude of different programs with anything from festivals to college programs to uh, Audubon half-day workshops, just after school programs, class trips, summer camps, residential programs, homeschooling. I mean, we just kind of have done a lot of things. I mean, probably if somebody dragged like $20 across my lawn, I would have grabbed it and said, all right, I'll teach you nature. But basically 35 years of that, but it's been a fun time. But anyway, I run this podcast now called the Forest Educator, and it's really all about forest education and the wide spectrum of positions and ways that people are working out in the world today, and trying to kind of bring everyone a little bit together, a little closer, and see what we're doing as a professional and viable educational modality that I hope will become the next elementary, early childhood, and maybe even middle school uh, style.
Yeah.
So, or paradigm, I guess you'd say. So anyway, it's just been really nice to interview with lots of people, and it was really fun talking with April. Every time I talk with her, we could go for like, sometimes it's like 2 hours, 3 hours, and then we finally have to go.
Gotta
But
go.
yeah, but
Yeah.
what's nice is that I mean, the hardest thing about my podcast is that I kind of get a conversation with somebody, or I end up talking about a particular subject, but I don't always get feedback from others about what they like, what they don't like, what comments they would add if there was a discussion. So that's kind of what I'm excited about with this roundtable, just to be able to connect with everybody
Yeah.
uh, and see how you're all doing.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited about it. I know I've been listening to Ricardo's podcast started in 2023 in June, and I had been listening to it, and I was like, I'm gonna have to reach out. And I had been following Ricardo on social media, but I was like, just this excitement. And so tonight our focus is really thinking about, to me, public school is really important to have the conversation about how do we bring nature to public school, because much of nature programming, particularly like nature preschools in particular, are really serving they're serving an important part of what we want for children. Yet we know that when it's a part day or part year program, many of which are private pay, it makes it really hard because that means that it's not equitable and not all families have access to it. So if we can begin to think about how do we bring nature-based approaches into the public schools, then we can, it's really a conversation about equity as well. And there's lots of different ways that it can work. In the podcast, I talk kind of about my journey as a public school teacher, oftentimes sort of feeling like the lone wolf, and like doing this alone. But, over the years, I live in Vermont, I teach in Vermont, and I know that there's some great programming and ways that we we as a collective have sort of gotten into working directly with public schools. And so I want to one of the models, and I think Amy, if you don't mind going first, actually, I'm going to kind of do a little segue into it. But one of the approaches here in Vermont that we have a lot of schools. I don't really know the statistics, and I'm not sure if anyone's actually keeping statistics on this, but a friend of ours, Amy Poor, is here tonight. She's an educator, and she's going to talk about her experience of incorporating eco. But our friend Amy Butler, for a long time, offered a program called ECO through the North Branch Nature Center. And this was a model where it was a standards-based curriculum that she mostly worked with kindergarten teachers in. And so it was a nature immersion model. So Amy and other staff members who were trained would go into public schools and kind of lead a half-day immersion, but then also model for the staff. And so the thinking was that this immersion model, then the teacher could kind of take over, and that staff member from the nature center didn't need to come anymore because the teacher, the kindergarten teacher or first grade teacher primarily, would feel comfortable with implementing this. And then Amy created that also into a 3-credit course. I think maybe 2 different 3-credit courses. But Amy Butler's did write a book, and it's coming out this year, which is quite exciting. But so Amy Poor, if you don't mind to unmute, maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with that. And hold on just one second. I'm gonna find you and feel so fancy with my technology. Hi, Amy. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for hosting another great opportunity for people to connect.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the podcast. Definitely felt connections to a lot of things that you were touching on. But to speak about what I do, so I'm a kindergarten teacher up in Underhill, and the last so I've actually only been at this school for 2 years. I taught first grade prior to that at a different school, and but the last 6 years, so teaching in elementary, I've been able to incorporate like a Woodsy Wednesday or a Forest Friday. I now call it Eco, and I'm going out twice a week with my kindergartners, and so 2 mornings a week. And I made this deal with myself this summer. I was like, I want to extend my program outdoors, and it's going to be no excuse. Like, this is what I'm doing, no matter the weather. I had support from my principal. I figured out the toilet situation. I literally drag this wagon with this little luggable loo toilet, and it sits in my classroom, and everybody who comes in is like, "Is that a toilet?" I was like, "Yes, yes, it is." And so that was a big challenge. I thought, because the way our school is set up, the forest where we want to be is a little bit of a distance, and just back and forth with bathroom trips just isn't fun. And it's just not even possible if you're on your own. So I solved that problem. I also have been building on outdoor classrooms kind of wherever I go. So the last school I took that on, and this year we also built another one in Underhill, and so now we have a couple spaces to go to, which is really nice, and I think makes it extra special. We have one that we call the Owl's Nest, and we have one that called the Coyote Den. it's also among, trails where we can hike and just sit and listen to bird songs. And recently we hiked up to this field, and it was like probably a 10-degree day. And I debated with myself, is this too cold? And I was like, no, let's just do it. We'll try it. If it's too cold, we'll come back. But we kept our bodies moving the whole time. And by the time we reached the field, we were all like almost sweating. And, we sat down and turned on the Merlin Bird ID app and just communicated with chickadees. And it was just this really magical moment. And on the way back, this little boy says to me, "Thanks, Mrs. Poor, for quite an adventure today." And it was just those moments that you're like, yes, I'm glad I stuck with what I wanted to do that day. Um, so I guess the struggle that I sometimes find myself in is that comparison of like, oh, the other kindergarten teacher's inside right now teaching this, and I'm out here. And I like value it, and I know the importance of it, but there is something in my head like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And so it's kind of that struggle of um, curriculum versus, I like to do like place-based learning or seasonal themes. And what's really, to me, that's really important, to be talking about the animals that are around us, the weather that's going on, the seasonal changes. And so I really do incorporate a lot of that into what I'm doing. Um, but also sneaking curriculum and trying to be creative with curriculum to make it fit. Like right now, we're in a force and motion unit, science unit, and I was like, well, instead of making, oh, I forgot what that thing is called. Not a pinball machine, but a I'm totally forgetting. Um, Kind of like an air hockey
Okay.
idea.
Foosball?
And
Is it
what?
like foosball?
No, not
No, not
foosball.
foosball, 'cause that has air.
There's
But
something
kind
else
of
I'm
coming up
totally.
with a nature version of it, is that what
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and so we played outside on the ice and used that as,
yeah,
um, our, environment, and it was a blast, and it was great, and I was like, "Yes, see, this is like that." You mentioned yes, or in the podcast, like thinking, like being in the box, but trying to think outside the box, and I
yes.
think that's huge, and I love that, and that's what gets me excited about teaching and feeling good about my job, um, when I do take those risks. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, awesome. Thank you for
yeah,
being here. And I think
yeah,
for me too, it's like even you who you've been doing this for a while, um, and you know the value of it and you believe in it and you know that it aligns to the standards and what you have to teach, but there's still that twinge of,
mhm,
when you start to compare yourself to a traditional teacher, it's like, well, you know would we be making more academic gains? But then you can think about all of those other developmental benefits that children are building from it. And
mhm,
if you made some little if you did some sort of science lesson in the indoors versus doing something similar but with natural materials in the outdoors, like which is going to stick in their brains longer? I mean,
yeah,
I think I know for sure, but still
right,
there's that justification piece of it. And so
mhm,
it's good when you have support people around you to keep, kind of um fanning your flame a little bit of like, no, this
yeah.
is good, this is important. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for having these opportunities.
Yeah, well, we're gonna yes, that's all part of it. I'm gonna ask, down along the bottom, there's a thing that said, and Ricardo, did you wanna chime in on anything there that Amy said? I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot, um, but in the along the bottom, the reactions, there's a little smiley face that has a plus sign on top of it, and you can raise if you click on that, you can raise your hand, and then I can kind of call on people who are ready, who want to chime in. I do have my list. Some people just kind of wanted to come and listen in, but if you wanted to chime in and take sort of the spotlight, I was going to call it the hot seat, and then I thought, I don't know, maybe people would feel nervous about that. The I know for my own self, I was interested to hear from Karen, and I think you can add a lot of value and a different perspective. So let me remove Amy's spotlight. Karen, who I've not seen in person, but I was met online the other day. Here she is. Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you so much for providing this opportunity. So for someone like me, this is a very new and different group of, I'm used to doing a lot of conferences with people, but not in this realm. So it's pretty exciting for me. Anyhow, yeah, so I guess I have been following April for a while through various groups on Facebook, and I came across the links for the podcast. So I was listening to that, and I think just in one of the comments threads, I started talking with you and Ricardo back and forth a little bit. So that's how we connected. But anyhow, I think what immediately, whenever I talk to groups like this, which is rare, the first thing I say that makes everyone's eyes all of a sudden go wide is that my classroom is in Harlem, in Manhattan, in New York City. So it's a very, very different, I would never call myself a forest educator, but we have an outdoor classroom. We are very fortunate. We're on the grounds of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which is by New York City standards, a very large piece of land. By most of your standards, your backyard. But anyhow,
Yeah.
so I was never an outdoor educator. My background is very much Reggio Emilia background in nursery and pre-K, and I was hired at my current school pre-COVID to bring it more into the Reggio realm. It had been a very traditional school. So they brought me in for that. And I was already semi-retired, and I knew somebody on the board, and they were like, okay, they need you. And I was like, all right. So then COVID hit, and COVID hit New York City in ways that it didn't hit a lot of other parts of the country. So we really went into full lockdown. So during that period, I was frequently in communication with a lot of my colleagues over in Italy who had gotten hit about a month prior to New York pretty hard also in that region. And I was asking them for help, like, what are you doing during lockdown? And they were telling me all the things they were doing on, their equivalent of Zoom. And then we realized, okay, we're going to go out of business. And a lot of New York City schools were looking at that, like, we're going to go out of business because nobody's going to pay tuition for their kid to sit on Zoom.
Yeah.
When the first lockdown hit, I mean, obviously everybody went into lockdown. We didn't have a choice. The government, the various local and state governments made us do it. But for September of 2020, a lot of schools were like, what do we do? We're, and we were in this crazy position where, the people, a couple of my colleagues in Italy were like, look, this is not our ballpark being this outdoor thing, but we're going to put you in contact with some people, 2 schools in Finland and a school in Denmark, and these people are going to help you out. So I was like, okay, so net is, I am extremely fortunate that because we're on the cathedral grounds, many decades ago, the cathedral had gifted our program, long before I was there, a fenced off garden space that had gotten very derelict and was used a couple times a year to, whatever, do our nature thing, which was nothing. And I went down there and I realized there's a lot of square footage down here. And maybe if we do, pull out some tables and chairs and just, pitch a tent and see what we can do. And we can stay open and actually, pay our bills. So anyway, so that's what happened. And the first year, September of 2020, I only had 7 families that were willing to, well, first of all, people in New York were still very, very scared. even for an outdoor piece. I had some obviously I have indoor spaces because that's what I was hired for. And I had parents that year that, okay, if you're going inside, you need to call me and I'll come and get them. You know, they didn't want their children indoors at all with other people. So 7 families, and we were out there and they were paying tuition and we were open, and we could proudly say, unlike most schools in New York, we were open 5 days a week in person, and, you know, but I had never done it before. And it was a total learning curve from literally day one. Yeah. Like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? I've been teaching for 30 years. What did I get myself into? And because of the nature of the pandemic, a lot of the kids that probably would have been able to go to kindergarten, their parents elected to just, they knew me already from the year before. So they were like, you know, let's just send them back to Miss Karen. And because they, you know, they're going to be on this weird hybrid, stupid schedule anyway. So let them go be out in the garden with Miss Karen, whatever that's going to mean. So 2 of those children in particular had been what my mother used to call real little boys, meaning a lot of energy, and, you know, had been classroom management challenges in the indoor spaces. And then I realized when I had them out there, like, all of that disappeared. It disappeared. And so many things started happening out there for me, even as an educator, not just for the kids. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So when the restrictions started to lift, I actually went to my director and I was like, you know what, if you want to go back to the other model, you're going to have to find somebody else, because I don't ever want to go back to that model again. Like, it was such a trial by fire. And I just, you know, I was sold. I was really sold. And I tell every colleague that I come by, especially the ones who laugh, because they know how much I used to hate being outside. And I'd be like, no, this is a game changer. It's a game changer. Yeah. And then 3 years ago, right, so the second year I was in the garden, we actually partnered with the New York City DOE, which was kind of amazing.
Which is the Department of Education.
Yeah, sorry, the Department of Education of New York City, which, as I'm sure you guys can extrapolate, is, if not the largest in the world, certainly one of them. So I'm a very, very teeny speck on their radar, but they have left us alone, which is kind of miraculous, and given us money and made it that we are in their portal as a choice for parents to choose for their UPK program. And at first, people kind of didn't believe it. They were like, oh yeah, they're outside a lot. Oh yeah. We see people out all the time. They're like, no, we're really outside. Like, they have nap time outside. We do almost everything outside almost all year round. And people are kind of floored by that because it's so foreign to people in New York City. But this year we had a waiting list of 103 families.
Wow.
So, it shows that there is proof in the pudding. So what started happening last year was our DOE rep started bringing teachers from other schools. So the one thing that, we're a very, very small program. So I have that garden all to myself. We now have a 3K, which is also part of the New York City DOE, but they're more hybrid and they have more indoor time, and their outdoor space is not as private. So they can't have the kind of storage and infrastructure that I now have. I now have a pavilion with a hard top that, that was a game changer in terms of how I could store things out there. I actually have access, at least in the warmer temperatures, to hoses with running water. In the winter, those are shut down for obvious reasons, but at least in the warmer months, I have that. So the 3K doesn't have that, but for all intent and purpose, I don't have to share my space. And I know that for other schools, that's an impossibility for every class to have its own outdoor classroom. That's not practical. Right. But what a lot of these, neighboring schools and we're talking up to about 3rd or 4th grade that have come to visit the garden, is the idea. And what I've been trying to get people to do is just kind of just think outside the box. And I've told people, I was like, just pick one thing besides recess, not recess, one thing that you wouldn't normally do outside, and just go do it outside.
That's awesome.
Just take the book you're going to read for story time and go do it outside. Anything. Take the box of Legos and have them sit on the ground and play with the Legos. Anything.
Yeah.
Just to feel what it's like, the difference of letting them just be outside.
Yeah.
And the response we've been getting, the amount of schools that have wanted to send cohorts of teachers just to see what's possible, and like I said, I'm spoiled in terms of the space by New York City standards that I have.
Right.
But it's just been an incredible adventure for me in a very late stage of my career, But the big piece for me now is the sense of, back to what you were saying, April, it's the piece of making sure that this type of education can be available to the largest level of diversity. And it's really important to me when I think back on what I was just talking about the classroom management piece, since that it's a very difficult topic here in New York because we have such a diverse population. And I often feel that obviously it skews far heavily towards boys being maligned, and especially children of color being maligned for what is, quite frankly, age-appropriate behavior, for being stuck inside a room and expected to sit and be attentive and blah, blah, blah. These are not outrageous behaviors. And what I've seen is with more outdoor time and more free time, we've all seen it, those behaviors tend to mitigate. And so that's been a big piece for me, talking with people here in New York about how just getting them outside to do a few of the non-recessy things. And so a lot of schools here in New York have started, the science programs are ahead of the game on this, and there's even some I have a school, I'm on 123rd Street in Harlem here in my house. There are 2 elementary schools literally right across the street from me, 2 different ones. And they each have outdoor spaces that the science teachers are using. So, and one has like a garden space going. So that's fantastic that they're trying to do that. But it's obviously a way different kind of struggle in an urban environment.
Yeah. But it's possible. It is possible.
It's possible. It's not easy. And like I said, they left me alone for 3 years. Now there's a new administration and they're trying to get us all to do teaching strategies, creative curriculum, like these little boxed theme things. And I'm like, no. So that kind of makes me laugh. But my favorite was when they handed me the box with the quote unquote tree curriculum. I'm like,
I'm familiar with it.
Our life on a shelf in my room is a tree curriculum. I was like, what are you teaching them about trees that they aren't learning on their own, climbing the one in my garden right now?
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's been the frustration. Well, anyway, but I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get together just for a tea one day and we can chat more. But so Karen,
and come to New York and come see the garden.
Okay. I told Ricardo, I was like, I got an invitation to Croatia after the podcast. So I'll just hit New York and head over to Croatia.
Nice.
I mean, the other big thing, and I know that I haven't listened to it yet, but I saw that your newest podcast that you were sharing the link for is more about staffing and things. And that's a huge issue for people like me in New York City, because this is such a new idea. Finding people willing to be outdoors in New York City in the winter is a challenge. I'm very interested in listening to that new podcast just to get some ideas of how we can further grow our staff with people who don't think we're crazy. So,
I do think putting it in as part, as you get new staff on, having a question or two in the interview process about what it looks, how would you teach outdoors in winter, or this is what our program does. How does that land with what you do, kind of thing? Because then you're setting it as part, and it really should be I've been talking a lot about written policy with my Wonders of Winter group, but it's like having written policy just makes it really clear, both to the families, but also to the people we employ, about what we do. But let's give Ricardo a moment to chime in. And then I was thinking about if maybe Vicky wanted to go. She said she wanted to share her journey by bringing nature-based education into the public schools. So Vicky, if that's going to work, we'll let Ricardo chime in, and then we'll go to Vicky.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add was when you were talking about boys and children of color, I was actually interviewing Megan Duncan yesterday, who does training for Forest School staff on like child behavior approaches to working with children, like positive behavior models, and getting everybody on the same page. And because that's one of the problems that a lot of forest schools have, is that they're bringing on new people, and you want to make sure that what everybody's doing is consistent for the students, so that they're not having one person be sarcastic and another person have another way of dealing with it and having it get crazy. But she brought up this concept, or this statistic that said that 250 preschoolers are either suspended or expelled every day in the United States. And I said, those are preschoolers. And I think they said half of them are boys of color. Like they're the majority. They're 50% of that. And so it's significant in the fact that the people who are doing these outdoor forest school programs, typically those are some of the children you're going to end up getting, because they're just not really able to go to school if they got expelled. And so it's a really interesting thing, because it really showcases that that public schools are struggling with children who are having problems with that emotional, behavior regulation and everything else. So because that's a present need for them, one of the things I've been kind of trying to communicate with everyone is to say, if you can find out what problems your local school is particularly having with students, it's an easier way to get your program approved. If you just say, oh, it's great because we're going to learn all about bugs and we're going to learn about nature and everything else. Like a lot of times that's just like blah, 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 blah to a superintendent. They're just like, whatever, I don't really know. I don't speak Chinese. But if you say, hey, that problem where we're expelling students and having problems with discipline, what if that all went away and we found a way to onboard these preschoolers and kindergarten and first grade and so forth, and onboard them into our system, and we modify that system? And if I can help you with that, now you're not going to have as much trouble teaching learning standards. You're not going to lose students by behavior. So, because they really look at it and go, are my numbers good? I'm a superintendent. And did I keep the school functioning and financially? Like anything other than that is just kind of like, it's kind of a gray area that they'll listen to you. I mean, I've talked with them and they'll just sort of stare and kind of go, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then you can tell that they immediately go back to their spreadsheet or whatever. And rightly so, maybe. I mean, I don't know their pressures. I know Albany has, I think a third of everybody in Albany works for the Department of Ed. But it's just a crazy situation. But I'm always really a big fan of find what people are the most hungry for, or what their biggest need is, and then meet that. And we have a model that works, right? So
yeah, I think part of it is those leverage points, though. It's like
yes,
deciding who you're talking to and what's their what's their thing that really rises to the most important. And we have such a big body of research now, which is which I find, the Children in Nature Network is probably one of the best places to find some of that research. But thinking about when you're approaching someone, what are those things that are most important to them? So if you're talking to a superintendent, like Ricardo's saying, like that might be the leverage point. But when you're talking to, maybe a building principal, maybe the initiative this year is like a focus on literacy, or a focus on writing or
Right.
something. And we can find these, you know, it's not like being sneaky, but it's like, oh, our
Yeah.
focus is on self-regulation and social emotional skills. Oh my gosh, this nature-based approaches is excellent for that. And here's a bunch of evidence, not just anecdotal because I've seen it, but here's research that kind of supports that. And I think that's that part though, that like you have to begin to have that confidence to speak about it and to advocate for what that children really need and children deserve. And that part doesn't go well when you're working in isolation. So finding supports or people kind of groups like this that can kind of lift you up or help you with your messaging, I think is important. But let's go on to Vicky, if you would. And she dropped a link in the chat there for us.
There we go. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to drop that link before I forget. Kayshawn, I met at the Children in Nature Network conference, and he's in the Bronx. So he's so supportive of me in Connecticut, and we've just stayed in touch. And he's just a great resource for nature connection in the city.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. It's great to see you all. I'm kind of new to connecting, I guess. I've been doing nature-based learning for a really long time. I have tons of background. So Karen, I'm a Reggio inspired teacher as well. Came from a Reggio school. We started it. I don't know. I was there maybe 10 years ago. That's where I started. I've done birth to 3. I'm now in Middletown Public Schools as a preschool special ed teacher. And I'm also on the board of Everyone Outside Nature Connection programs in Middletown area. And we've just done so much this past year. I think it's been exactly a year that I had basically end of last year, a meeting with our administration at Board of Ed. I've been taking children on hikes since I've been with the public school in the preschool for the past 4 years, just been doing nature-based learning without anything formal in there, but they trust me. They know I'm, a good educator. So I basically, since we've had just a really big influx of birth to 3 kiddos, not enough teachers, not enough support, I shared just my thoughts, my long-term goals, that I would maybe start my own school one day. I've got Everyone Outside, the Rockfall Foundation, which is another local organization, wants me to start my own school. So I said that. I said, honestly, I don't complain, but I love where I am. I love everything about early childhood and special ed, but I can't see myself doing this forever. Our kids need more. They need more space. They're coming to us with a lot more screen time, not a lot of connection to get outdoors and move their bodies. So of course we're seeing all these behaviors with typical developing children and children with special needs. So it just started as a conversation, and it, I guess, snowballed into, oh my gosh, we're going to start the first nature-based public preschool classroom this fall. So it's been pretty crazy, but I have support from Board of Ed. Just my evaluator, my administrator is wonderful. And like I said, I don't complain, I don't push things, but I just lead by example and find little ways to do things. I'm the only nature-y one right now. We have 2 other teachers that are possibly interested. So it's just been meeting every month, talking about plans where we can go. But there's a lot of just other things happening in the public school in our district too. There's a new age for children to enter kindergarten. So there's talks about spaces. So it's just a lot happening, but all good things from my end. I received a grant this year. Like I said, Board of Ed and our grant coordinator has been really helpful sending grants my way. So it's a ton of work. And feel like I'm always on these Zoom meetings, just, starting green committees, just trying to spread the word. So I'm very grateful just to have connections and just talking about it on my own time. But it's definitely just been a lot of work. And I'm not pressuring myself to be a certain way, to do things a certain way. Karen, I love what you shared about children just taking normal toys outside, because we have those children with special needs that have a lot happening inside of them and behaviors. So they might need a basket of fidget toys, but they're outside in the outside classroom. We stress just the need for, since they're all three, I work with all 3-year-olds, a fenced in area. So we're really lucky to have our inside classroom, even though we don't have a bathroom in there. It's in the hall because we moved towards the outside parts of the school. We have an inside classroom, an outside fenced in area classroom, which is turf, not what we love, but it's doable. It's safe for them. But we have tons of trails and huge green space. We are the most beautiful school in the town, I think. So we're abutting Wadsworth State Park. So we have tons of opportunities. We could, I'm like, let's get a classroom out in the woods. Like, we just have so many ideas. So it's really been with the support of the Board of Ed. My coordinator really has been supportive, even though she doesn't quite know a ton about nature-based learning. She's willing to learn a little bit more where she can, and she trusts me. And then my 2 paras who are, I wasn't sure how it would go, but they were just, we talked about it all last year. I didn't pressure them. Like, if you want to try this out, let me know. We came into the year like, all right, if we're not outside every day, if we're not outside for a certain amount of time, it's okay. But the Board of Ed bought us all the gear we need. So that's the biggest thing. They bought teachers and students the gear. And that was, besides the fenced in area that we wanted to start out with, it's the gear that really helped. So, because Middletown has a range of socioeconomic status and just areas where children live, access, children in DCF, of course, like everywhere. So we have the things we need, which are the basics, and we have the nature. So we are very lucky.
That's very cool. I think too, like, one of the things that I really love that you said is lead by example. And so sometimes it's like we might feel like we're going to wait for someone to do something for us, but it's like, or maybe we just start and kind of get out there. And I like that you talked with your paras and wanted them to be on board, because sometimes that's hard, that, you can be the teacher and be like, woohoo, we're doing this thing. And then you're realizing, oh, wait, my para, like, her body language is screaming that she's like not having a good time. Which influences the children. And you're mentioning of grants, like, I find in my teaching career, the way that I've been able to do a lot of things is to write grants. And, when working with a public school, most grants or many grants are, you have to be a nonprofit, and public schools qualify under that. So grant writing, I think, is really important. And, it's step by step. And the mention about gear, it's a really make or break kind of situation. Like, if you don't have the right kind of gear for the children, they're not going to be comfortable out there. But you said that they supported you also in your adults, your teachers, in having gear. And I think that's really important, especially in childcare settings too, where, the pay is less, and now we're asking them to be outside year round, and they need, kind of higher quality gear than what they already have. It's a barrier, not just for the families, but for the adults in the program too. But and Vicki, you said you're from Connecticut, right?
Yes.
Julia was asking a question. And Julia's wondering if you could share a link to it. She'd like to look at your public preschool program, if you have a website, if you want to share a link with her.
Yeah. So the thing is, it's a pilot, and it's a project of my principal, my administrator. So that was so tricky at the beginning of the year. They were like, all right, it's kind of hush hush. We're not saying anything. We're just doing you're in Miss Thompson's class. You're going to be doing it and trying it out.
Yeah.
I told all the families, you couldn't sign up for it. I have an Instagram page, just of community members that are enjoying nature-based learning early childhood. And I post, just pictures of things that we do. I just started that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I can put it in here, but
yeah. Well, and I feel that same way too. I'm teaching a public school part-time, now I'm just part-time. But it's like, it's not, there's this like privacy thing too. Like I feel like I'm on social media a lot, with the professional development that I do and the resources that I create, but I'm kind of protective of my classroom, and one, there's legalities behind that, but I don't know, it's hard to, so I kind of get that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I want to go on. We have a hand up. Yay. Pamela has got her hand up, but thanks, Vicki, for being here. And let me switch the spotlight. Look at me getting so efficient at this. Hi, Pamela. Welcome.
Hi. I was one that was just going to listen and take in some information, but I just thought maybe I would throw some information out there. I don't know.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
Is there anybody else that's here from Canada or Ontario
Oh, that's
at
a good
all?
question. Let me remove the spotlights and then we can, can't see everyone at once when we're doing it this way. Okay. Anybody else from Canada? No, I do. Yeah. Oh, wait. Judy. Oh, Judy's not from Canada. She has her hand up, but I think she's going to talk next.
Talk about something else. Well, I just the reason why I brought that up because I loved your podcast, by the way, and I connected
Oh, thank you.
in so many different ways. From like my dad loved the pot roast in St. Johnsbury when we used to drive through from New Hampshire. And I grew up, I'm Canadian, but I grew up about an hour from Burlington. So I'm very familiar with Vermont. We used to go skiing there and I love Vermont. But now I live in Ontario. And I live in the middle of nowhere. It's a very tiny town. Actually, is without the mountains. It's very similar to where you are. But we have a program here. It's early learning. We start kindergarten at 3 or 4 years old, and it's a 2-year program, and it's pretty much nature based. So right across the province, we spend half of our day inside and half of our day outside, or more or less. It's very flexible, but we do a lot of learning outside, and you can find learning in so many spaces. If there's ice that just broke, all of a sudden everyone's on their knees and they're looking for triangles. Or if you want to play spelling games, like they run and grab the branch, and then we're like in the mud and we're writing and practicing our letters, and we're collecting leaves and collecting branches to add and subtract, and it's everywhere. When you're out there, it's everywhere. And you're right, as long as everyone's dressed accordingly, it's such a nice space to teach in. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. What I just wanted to tell you is that for Karen and Victoria starting new programs, I just thought you might want to look at our curriculum or our program, because it might, instead of starting right from scratch, you might find a lot of information in the programming and your expectations and curriculum and stuff. It's already there. So it's just Ontario Kindergarten Program is what you would just Google that and it'll come right up. And then, yeah.
Cool. In Ontario, there is, what's her name? Kristen Langus. You could probably find it and drop it in the chat, but the, Kaylin, is it for it? What's her, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's, Kristen, do you remember what I'm talking about? Wait, is Kristen still here? Yeah, she is. No, Kaylin with the Forest, is it Forest School? Isn't she in Ontario? I know Ontario is huge. And I wanted to say too, that my husband's from Montreal, so we get to go there a lot. So I get to spend a fair amount of time in Canada. And many of us, at least 4 of us on this call, are very close in the northern part of Vermont. So we're pretty close. I'm trying to think of, Kristen, do you know what I'm talking about? No? Kaylin, the woman who had the...
All I know is that you wanted to take a road trip with me to Ontario. We talked about how it was kind of like 5 hours away, and let's do it. That's all I know is I told you I'm taking a road trip with you, but
perfect.
I don't remember it. Sorry.
That's okay. Kristen, we'll come back to you, but because I wanted, and Pamela, were you done? I didn't want to cut you off, but yeah, we're good. Okay, awesome. Thanks for being here. Let's go to Judy. Judy Pransky is, one of the times Judy's was interviewed was when here in Vermont, we've done a lot of advocacy work for early childhood educators for equity and pay equity. And Judy was on, I don't remember what it was, Judy, if it was the radio or if it was some sort of recording. And she was like, at that point, I think you were like, I'm 71 years old and I have no hope of retiring ever. It's like, oh, Judy. So anyway, Judy, that's your intro. And we just have you unmute.
Okay.
Here she is.
Well, now I'm 77 years old and I
Okay, so
have
it's been a
no
while.
hope of retiring. What I wanted to share with you is that I began my career 55 years ago. I was a teacher, a principal in the Boston Public Schools in Annunciation Road, Mission Hill projects. Never taught a white child till I moved to Vermont. Those kids got to walk across the tar, through gates, through chain link fences. And I said, I'm taking them out of here. And I used to march half my school, the Ira Allen School, my first taste of Vermont. I used to march them over to the fens, across Huntington Avenue and down to the fens. And we would do nature-based stuff. When I started my first childcare in Vermont after teaching for a number of years, and not too many years, I opened my first childcare at a beautiful place at Emerson Falls. So there's a big river and a waterfall. I built a hydroelectric station first so I could pay for teaching young children. And we had beautiful environments. And then I had a center. One of my centers was on the highway, on Route 5. Nothing but gravel in a play yard. It was horrifying. So I used to take my kids back to Emerson Falls. And then I opened Camp Laughing Turtle, which was totally nature made. My little garden is 88 acres.
Wow.
Anyway, meadow, marsh, pond environment. And what I really saw more than anything was that the children, not only the children in my childcare who walked through those metal gates to get everywhere, lived inside chain link fences on, the 7th floor of the project. I got, after being at Camp Laughing Turtle for a summer and then many summers, I was constantly asked by the school, what did I do? These kids were so changed. What did I do? Or how did I handle this kid who was such a troublemaker? Because I didn't say that I had any trouble with him. My reality was to share with them what I did with those children day in and day out. Me and a staff we had almost 100 children every day. 88 was around our average attendance. And lots of kids who had grown up through the childcare were camp counselors, and it was pretty exciting to see the parents want to come to Camp Laughing Turtle to see what it was that we did with kids. So I made the parents tromp through the marsh and tromp through the swamp and, get in the pond and just do things that let out a lot of negative energy and brought in a lot of positive energy. And that's exactly what I have shared with the school ever since. I still bring my childcare folks out to my place in Cabot, at least once a month, maybe more, in the cold, in the sun, in the rain, whatever. We choose the day and we do it. And children benefit so much from the experiences. They learn so much about nature. They get so connected with nature that they just love it. But their parents are connected too. They understand. And hopefully, I've invited schools to come and join us, especially those schools in St. Johnsbury who say, what did you do with it? This kid is so good with you and he's so bad with us. And I say, no, you're so bad with him because you're not bringing him the experiences he needs to have. So, my reality is you just keep on keeping on and keep trying to get the folks in the public school to see how valuable and important it was. I have a good pulpit to be on because I spent time in the public schools for years and created early childhood programs that are still going on today after many years, and created some alternatives for behavioral adjusting in a classroom by being outside of a classroom. So we get visits from the Cabot School and the Walden School, and they come and they, do project-based experiences here in these beautiful 88 acres. Thank you, God.
Yes. Oh, well, I appreciate you being here. And I think, you're right. Like we have if we can open doors for public schools to be able to see these opportunities, that's lowering the bar for them, right? So maybe the school isn't ready to invest, you know, $20,000 to, you know, hire Ricardo as a consultant to bring in, or to do professional development or something, but maybe they're open to trying some things out with, whether it is visiting your 88 acres, or, for other people, like visiting a farm or going to a nature center, but kind of helping to see these are resources that we have within our community.
Right.
That the children in our community should be able to access, but I think often public school teachers are really busy. And so they're not necessarily the one who's able to take the time to line up those kinds of things. So if we can, act, because I kind of think of this too as like with tapping into public schools, some of us are in the system and they're in there, and others are outside of the system. But how can we, sort of open the doors to get kids connected? But Ricardo, do you want to chime in on Judy's ideas?
Chime in. I don't know, but all I can say is I think that's really impressive, and it feels like your story of what you've done and what you've accomplished is a really important thing, because sometimes people go and they go, oh, I want to be outside. I have a child, my kid's not doing well in school. Oh no, I discovered forest school. Now I'm going to get trained. I start a little school.
Mhm.
And it can kind of feel like, oh, look, I got trained and this is all brand new. And it's really not brand new. There have been people doing it for 20 years, 30 years or longer.
Mhm.
So, but what's new is the fact that we're starting to do it. And I
Right.
really love the hearing about your accomplishments and everything else and your perspective. And the thing that I would just maybe say that kind of piggybacks on what April is saying is that we have a lot of people who are teachers willing to try things. We have a lot of people who are outside of the system willing to run a school or work within the system to bring children outside. What it doesn't seem like we have is enough advocates for these things. And we also don't have enough like we have research that's like, oh yeah, we spent $1 million and nature's good for kids or something, but that research isn't really translatable in many cases to getting us more money and getting us more resources and bringing it forward easily. And so I feel like we need more advocacy, people who can go in. Like I'm being asked to go to schools and give like a nature program presentation to kind of kick off their forest school merit, to try to then kind of inspire the teachers, inspire the parents, and try to get the whole school on the same page and get excited about it. And I feel like we need that, at the superintendent level, the principal level, the teachers level, and everybody in between. And it's an exhausting kind of job, and I don't know who would fund it, but it just seems like that's a really big piece that if we don't have that, then what's going to happen is every one of us is going to reinvent the wheel every time and then run into the same walls every time. And then they're posting in a forest school group going, oh, I'm really disgusted with my school and I didn't do this or this. Like we need people that don't know how to draw up a contract with a school, that if you're a forest school and you're going to work with a public school, how are you going to delineate what that relationship is, get paid, and be able to write in what it is and protect it so that it's not watered down,
Right.
6 weeks later, or 6 months later. And, not because the school is necessarily, bad or evil or whatever, but it's just that there's a lot of pressures coming at principals, superintendent. And pressures we know nothing about. So when that happens, we're kind of in a way like, any program is at risk, right? Music programs at risk, sports programs are at risk. So we just need to be able to write up really good agreements, make sure we get paid for what we're doing, because we are bringing something that's really, I believe that this nature education piece is the new model, right? So I believe it's the new model for that. It will be within 10 years, 15 years. I'm hoping that 50% of schools will be using these modalities. But in order to get there, we got to get paid. We got to get taken seriously. We need to have outcomes. We need to know that somebody else is advocating for our outcomes, so that if you're there with the children and you're going, hey, that kid jumped in a mud puddle for 2 hours straight and then looked at a woolly bear. You don't really need somebody coming in and going like, hey, well, are they meeting the standards to me? I'm just like, yeah, no, just stop that. That's not what this is about in that way, it's not linear in that way. But we need to be able to make that clear, right?
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
If an advocacy group gets started, I would love to be invited to be a part of that nature-based education advocacy group. I just hopped off spending years in the legislature to try and get a raise in subsidy rates. Got them. Okay, I can move on now. Yay!
Yeah.
I mean, that's been years.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that I would say, I see my privilege in, I live in Vermont, and we do, as much as we still have work to do within our public schools and in our legislature for things in early childhood, that we have this really strong advocacy. And we have that conversation that you were talking about, you had, Ricardo, with Megan, and the expulsion and
right.
Yeah.
Suspension.
Like that was, there was advocacy in just a couple of years ago, I think 2021, about we're completely have banned suspension and expulsions for students who are under 8 years old, except if there's like some really high level crises or something happening. And same thing, like Judy was just saying, like we've done a lot of work with getting the childcare subsidy rates up, which means we're going to be able to deliver better early childhood programs. Like that took a lot of work. I was served on the task force here, really looking at what do we call ourselves, and we kind of landed at early childhood educators. So like we're all on the same page. And I feel the same way, Judy, what you just said about now, like, okay, like I did 4 years on the task force, and I'm like, okay, that project's done. There's others that are continuing on the work, but this idea of nature-based advocacy is really what is firing me up. So stay tuned. I will put it in my newsletter. You guys are on my newsletter. But and one other thing, Pamela, I dropped in the chat in Ontario. It's in Kingston, Ontario. So I know Ontario's big. I don't know if that's close to you or not, but there's a conference that's coming up, and it's an in-person conference. I'm not there, and I'm not associated with it, though. If Kristen and I get ourselves organized, we might show up. It might be a ladies road trip. But let's go on to the next one. We're going to go to Kathleen, and then we'll go to Shanda. All right. Thanks, Kathleen, for being here. Whoops, where did you go? There you are.
Here I am. Thank you, April.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I am in Central Vermont, and I have a small in-home childcare program of 12 children. And we are a nature-based, we always have been. And I was doing nature-based childcare kind of at a starting level 25 years ago when I ran a center. But I just wanted to say that I have primarily infants and toddlers now, because our school, Northville Elementary, used to have eco in the school, and then it got voted out.
Yeah.
And so it's a really horrible little yard, very little green space. And so my hope is so Northfield created a preschool program, which is 5 days a week, every day. So those children who were coming to me and spending all this time outside are now going down to the preschool. And what I have seen over the 6 years that I've been doing this nature base out of my home, we're out there from 7 till 5. We sleep outside, we have portable potty, we do it all. But in the winter, we sleep inside. But we're outside most of the time. And so I'm building this little nature-based community within my town, advocating for children to be outdoors. So what I've started seeing are the parents who are leaving my program. They're now down at the school level advocating, no, we want more outdoor experiences, classroom experiences for our children. Our kids just came from this amazing program where they're outside all day, they're up in the woods, and now they have nothing. And children, speaking to everybody pretty much who is talking about, Karen spoke a lot about behaviors. All these children that had no behaviors here in my program are all now down at the public school getting assessments done, putting on IEPs, behavioral, and we had none of that. So in my own little way, with just my 12 children, we are making a dent in my town in hopes that, we get the ball rolling with these 1-year-olds and these infants that are outdoors. And that's just what is normal for them. Yeah. So that's really all I wanted to share.
No, and I'm so glad.
Ricardo, I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the podcast. And, thank you, Judy. Judy and I go way back, but, you don't have to be a big dude to make an impact. And so that's
right.
And I think too that your work in showing families like what you do, you've built this trust with families that they understand what you do, they love what you do, and they understand it. And so it's like you're building a different level of advocacy, and like these families now going and saying, yeah, but my child thrives when they're outside, that we didn't, so it's kind of like that, I think, is a really, a lot of times we talk about academic push down, and so like what used to be third grade standards, have been pushed down to second grade, and like first grade stuff has been pushed to kindergarten. Well, it's almost like the opposite. I can just kind of picture Kathleen like pushing this best practices that she has going in her family program up and saying like children thrive when they're here, and these are the families see it and understand it, and then they can advocate for that, as well in the public schools. So I think that's really powerful. Let's go to our friend from Idaho, Shanda, and tell me if I'm pronouncing. I know we talked earlier today, but am I pronouncing it right?
Yes, that's right.
Shanda.
Thank you so much. And I do appreciate, I spent 45 minutes or so with April this morning, and it was really inspiring. I needed a little shot in the arm on this cold February day. So thank you. And Kathleen, I would love to network with you. If you could maybe send me your email or something in the chat, I would love to chat with you. I'm kind of in the same boat. I owned a traditional program for 27 years. I'm in rural Idaho. We just have a small town of like 3,500 people in Salmon, and worked, sold our program or sold our building and worked for Head Start for 2 years during COVID. And I was really struggling. Like Karen, I think that I was feeling your anxiety when you were telling your story about teaching online and all that. And it was really stressful. And I was like, I want more for these kids. And even when we did come back after teaching from Zoom, they had these little squares on the floor. And I was just like, no, I mourned, like I grieved, I sobbed. I'm like, I'm not going to keep a 3-year-old in a box and make them stay in and have these sanitized toys all day. And I went in on a Sunday and I just wrote this like scathing from my, soapbox email and I packed my office and I went across the street and I worked at this amazing daycare for a year, and it was really good, but they had this 3 strikes you're out policy and they would kick them out. They would just, and so there were all these kids that were like on their 3rd strike. And so I just was like, you know what? I'm opening a farm school. We had just built our dream home just 8 miles out of town, and we raise mini Jersey milk cows, and we have chickens and turkeys and quail and ducks and goats and all the things. And I'm like, you know what? Kids love this. And so when I left, I had 11 families come with me from this program, and the one little boy was on his way out. And he, the troublemaker becomes the leader when you get him outside, and it's been amazing. And so this is our 2nd year. I've been with our program. It's called Failings Farm and Nature School. And we have had some bumps in the road, and April was really gracious today to kind of help me work through some of those things. But it's just been amazing. And one thing that I hear a lot of you saying is like, oh, we got funding from this, or we got grant money from that. And I am really struggling right now because I'm just for profit. And so it is a struggle. And so I'm kind of on that teetering of like, do I go nonprofit and try to kind of get some grants and things like that? Did get my seeds in the mail today, April. Those are amazing. Holy moly. I was like, springtime. So yeah, so we've gotten some little grants like that, like seeds and stuff, but it is really a struggle. It's a struggle to pay myself and collect the money and have money to do these things. And so that's something we're looking into. But like we have a huge garden, and we've helped families start flocks, and then once a month we teach a homesteading class to our families. So coming alongside these young families and teaching them like, here, you can cook for yourself, you can make your homemade bread for the week, and you can make cheese and soap and all these things. And then we harvest food out of the garden every week. And then I text them every Monday and say, these are our offerings for the week. And then they text me what they want, if they want raw milk or eggs or zucchini or lettuce or whatever, and we pack them in their rebag and hang it in their cubby. And so when they come, they get their veggies and stuff. And then we have our local agency that comes in and does a cooking class once a month, and we offer that to the families as well. But that's kind of my vision, like coming alongside these families. I mean, we saw with COVID how scary it was when we didn't have food, and so that's kind of my vision of like teaching these families how to grow their own foods. We had 7 families last year start chicken flocks, and 5 families start new gardens, which was huge. So that's kind of my vision. And I struggle with the nonprofit thing, but hopefully I can navigate through that and offer some different things this summer that might help with that. But anyway, that's my program. So if anybody has any ideas if I should like go nonprofit or not, I would be open to that.
That's a great segue. I think we'll go to Chris. She didn't have her hand raised, but my friend Kristen Langus is such a great friend to me, but she runs a nonprofit organization called Field Farm and Forest. I'm going to look also, there is a webinar coming up, and I'll have to see, it's because it talks about for-profit versus nonprofit, because there are pros and cons to it. But let's hand it over to Kristen and hear from her.
Oh man, thanks, April. And thanks, Ricardo. Wow. I feel like I'm meeting I don't know. I've listened to every podcast. That's all I have to say. And I'm horrible at leaving reviews for you, Ricardo, but just while I move sheep fencing, everything, I'm constantly listening to your podcast. So thank you. You are a treasure trove of wisdom for anybody working with kids. So I just wanted to put that out there. I've learned a ton, and I've been doing this for a long time. So I don't have great wisdom about the nonprofit versus profit thing, because my organization is a nonprofit. We primarily, I'm not really in charge of it either. I'll just put that out there. Everyone thinks I am, but
all nonprofits have a board.
Fine.
Yeah, so you're not a solo.
I founded it with a bunch of friends. Anyway, after 10 years or so, we're still, relying on this childcare model. We have other programming that we do to connect kids with nature. And but we wear a lot of hats. April talks a lot about this in your website. You know, we wear a lot of hats, and there's just like so little time to really embrace the grant writing and all of that. I mean, there's just like so little time. So I think we could have definitely in the last 10 years done more to make more money, you know, but it's still little fundraisers here and there to just kind of get by. And the childcare is what we're relying on, which has been going great. So I have a lot to say about that sort of thing and nature connection in general. But I want to put the disclaimer that I only lasted 1 year in public school. And that was the year COVID hit. So I have been teaching since like 95 or something. And I've been doing all sorts of teaching. So I'm a science person. So I studied trees and forest ecology and all that. I have a master's in that. And so I've taught high school students at Burke Mountain Academy, bringing them out into the forest. And then I taught middle schoolers at different private schools. I got hired to teach like first grade, kindergarten, whatever. I've taught in math, everything in all these little dinky schools that we have here in Vermont. But then I went to public school, and it was like absolutely shocking how hard it was to bring kids outside, because I'm really used to bringing kids outside. And I don't know, I have a lot of theories about it. It was a big school, but they weren't used to going outside. So as soon as you get them outside, it's like pandemonium, you know. And also there's just so much red tape, and I brought them down the wrong stairwell, that I got in trouble for that, you know. Who knew? So things, you know, I don't know. It was really challenging to teach in public school for me, but that was 8th graders. And so anyone who teaches kids, I just want to put the plug out there. And I think Ricardo kind of touched on this a little bit. It's just all ages deserve this outdoor time and nature time. And if we can, so right now I'm a preschool teacher, and I feel like what I'm doing is making the world a better place, not only for the trees in the future, so that kids will like trees, but also for all the future teachers that these kids are going to have, because they're going to be well grounded. They're going to be, their bodies have been moving, their brains are well developed, you know, they've had a great childhood freedom, they learn how to self-regulate. All the stuff that comes with being out in nature will make their 8th grade teacher very happy someday, because it'll just make their life a little bit easier. The kids will be just better off later on in school. So yeah, 8th grade was really hard to just for kids who haven't been outside in years, to bring them outside. And naive me is like, yeah, we'll do this lesson. It's going to go great, because I've been doing this for 20 years. And it was really a challenge. And I ended up not going outside very much. But so I don't know. I just have a lot of different ideas. I think Ricardo touched on a lot of things that, and some of you guys did too. I can go in a bunch of directions, but basically I want to just reiterate the fact that when you bring the children outside, it's not just for like the curriculum you need to teach. And I know that's really important, especially when you get to schools that care about that stuff, the standards. I've been really lucky to work in independent schools that give me free reign, like teach science, teach physics, you know, whatever, however you want. And they're not really checking in on me, but I know that a lot of places are not like that. So you have to check the boxes. But, you know, just bringing them outside just to do their lessons and just getting them used to that day after day after day, whether it's, you know, music class or just reading your read aloud book. It makes it more normal. I think someone mentioned that too. There's normalcy to being outside. It's not like they're going to go nuts when they first get outside without a fence somewhere for the first time ever. So you just have to get into the routine of doing that. And you'll find that the leaders are the kids that are usually off the wall in the classroom. And yeah, there's just so many ways to assess kids instead of just the academics, that I have so many anecdotal stories of what our programs have done for children. And I hear it when the children go into kindergarten. Like I had some go to kindergarten this year, and the moms are just like crying how much they miss, you know, what their kids had last year or the year before, being outside nature. They don't get that anymore. I'm like, really? This is Vermont. I mean, it's like why? But it just doesn't happen. So, wow, there's just so many benefits to the kids of all ages. And I will just say one story. So April, when I was in St. Johnsbury teaching, not at the public school, but at Good Shepherd, I would walk my kids a mile. I had to advocate for this so badly because nobody wanted to go outside. No teachers were interested in going out for recess or anything. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I am not going to be in this building all day. These kids need to be out. I need to do my John Young coyote mentoring stuff with these kids bad. And so I took my 5th and 6th grade and I put like bandanas around their arms so they were color coded so I could like visually keep track of the 30 children that I was walking down the street in St. Johnsbury to the town forest. And we get to the town forest and I did my whole John Young thing. You know, I had like a flow of the day and this and that. A lot of free time. I mean, we had an hour and not a lot. Right now I'm outside for like 8 hours. But anyway, we had an hour and like maybe half an hour of free time to play. And those kids came, like that was their year. We did it in the spring, we did it in the fall. And that was their memory of their 5th and 6th grade. It's just going out to the town forest. I mean, they had to walk 2 miles, all weather, to do that. But it was that free play. And I have lots of videos because my daughter was part of that group. And it's like seeing them children again as 5th graders, you know, like playing with building forts and whatever, you know, like being Vikings, whatever they're doing. It's just like, as a mom with older kids now, it's just so endearing to see like that, the benefits of that play. So just, you don't have to do the academics, just the play itself is just so beneficial to them. So I probably used up my 5 minutes. I don't know what else to say. I have had a lot of people move up to Vermont because of our programs, our summer programs, because they feel free. Like this freedom we give kids without fences. It's just like life-changing for these families. Yeah.
I think you did use up your 5 minutes, but I didn't
I
bring
did.
a gong.
I
Kristen's a
always
good friend of
do.
mine, so I was like, I'm going to bring a gong because I can't imagine you only talking for 5 minutes.
And I would be
You're pretty
honored
good.
if you gonged me.
But I think Kristen has some really successful summer programming too, like the kind that fills up really quickly. And so I know, Shanda, that's probably something that would be a great conversation piece too. Ricardo mentioned something that I think is
I'll put my website. I'll put the website
Yeah.
right there, April.
Yeah, do that. And I Shanda, I also put in the chat a link to a workshop that Dr. Rachel Larimore is doing called Nonprofit or For-Profit: Finding the Best Path for Your Program. And so there's a link for that in the chat. But when Ricardo was talking about this idea of like learning, even how do you write a project proposal that you could submit to a public school, like that's a skill that I feel like a lot of nature people don't have. And even just the piece of like learning how to market yourself or message yourself, like there's a piece of, if that's sort of like the direction that you're going of you're like, man, like Kristen said, she only lasted a year in the public school, but maybe like working inside the school as a school employee isn't your thing, but maybe the path in is through doing a consulting work, like through professional development, or through doing, programming, like nature immersion programming that kind of happens throughout the year, like as I described with Amy Butler's sort of model of eco. But I think, Ricardo, that those are skills that you've learned how to do. And I know I think it was the after school podcast that you did like early on, you talked about that, like you have to kind of learn how to message yourself so that you're not just coming in as, like an hourly employee, but rather like really learning how to talk about the programming that you do so that you can charge, so I don't know if you want to chime in on that. And before you say, I just wanted to say, I think we've got to everyone who wanted to talk. We do have 2 Julias who neither have spoken. And so I do want to make sure that Julia, either of you, can you want to give me a thumbs up if you want to talk? You do want to talk? Okay, cool. Julia Eastman wants to talk. And the other Julia, are you wanting to talk or? Yes, she is. Okay. So Ricardo, you have 1 minute. Wait, you're on mute.
All right. I guess I'm off now. Yeah, it's a pretty big topic actually, and I'm actually thinking about doing a podcast about it so that way a lot more people can hear about it.
Yeah.
But I always like to say, being nonprofit, we're nonprofit. I didn't want to be nonprofit. I had like 5 people that were like, we're going to be nonprofit. We're going to get grants. And I'm like, we can do that, but I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to be dealing with all the stuff. Within 6 months, we got our 501c3. They all left. And, I spent 3 years just being really angry. So, and we didn't get very many grants. However, there are things that nonprofits do help you. If you are a nonprofit, it is helpful because people see you in a little bit different way. But my feeling oftentimes is if you're not really, if you're good at networking and you've got people that are like loving what you do and are volunteering and are wanting to help you and wanting to help you raise money or whatever, if they're that kind of person who's really passionate, then being nonprofit's good because you can make some money. They can come in and help you and you're going to get there. But if it's just going to be one more thing you're going to have to do, it's just going to be a time devourer with very little return. And the other thing I'll mention is that if you are for profit, you have to be solvent. You have to keep your bottom line. You have to make money. And a lot of people, they'll just be like, well, I run my program. I can only take 7 kids, or I can take 12, or I can only do this or that. And what happens is that they don't charge enough. And so they basically slowly die. And people come and help them and then leave because they don't get paid enough. And you're still there because you have the founder thing and you just don't want to give it up. But you have to charge whatever you have to charge to do your thing. And you have to also then, if you can't get all your income from that, you've got to come up with some other way that's going to be I don't know, I always call it like a buffalo versus, like, if you're hunting, you could feed your family with squirrels, but then you're going to be going out every day getting 3 squirrels every single day. So you really have to decide, am I going to be a squirrel hunter or would I be better to be a buffalo hunter? And in my opinion, it's better to go for like one really good buffalo, have 1 or 2 really big events, summer camp, something like have a festival, have something that's going to actually bring in enough income that will then kind of overshadow everything. And that's hard to do. Like this is not easy, but you have to find something. Or the other thing you have to do is find a partner who is nonprofit. That's good too. There's a lot of things you can do, but I'll tell you, it's, I don't advise. I actually tell people don't become nonprofit, rather than that. So anyway, my 17 minutes is up.
Yeah, just very quickly on that. I tend to tell people not to go nonprofit, because there's a lot of reasons behind it. There's pros and cons to both, but for me, I like to have autonomy and to be able to make independent decisions. And that's something that when you have a nonprofit and you have a board, you then need to have approval for things. And for me, I don't know, I'm headstrong, I guess, but that's hard for me. We have 2 more people to share. I'm also recognizing the time. So if anybody's here and you have to pop off right at time, certainly we appreciate you being here. But let's go to Julia Eastman first.
Hey there, sorry. Ricardo, just kind of touching base to what you were just saying about the nonprofit versus profit. Our program is currently for profit, and we've been trying to go back and forth oscillating whether we become a nonprofit or a for-profit. And I'd be curious to have your opinion. We've thought about keeping our LLC as it is, but then creating an umbrella nonprofit where we're able to reach into the public schools. My thing is I don't want nature-based education to be for people who can afford it or who can get their kids to part-time programs. So trying to find ways that we can push into other areas of education, other places where we can reach to children. But so I'd be curious about if you have any experience with that, with keeping it as a business, but then having nonprofits under you to do those other services. But a little bit of my story. I'm a public school teacher by training for 20 years. And then COVID hit and I had just moved into a part-time position at my public school. So of course that was removed when COVID hit. And my son was 3. And so I was like, oh my God, I got to teach him. I got to be a preschool teacher now. And I was so stressed out and he was so unhappy. And I'm like, man, like we on the weekends, we have so much fun exploring together. Like, why is this not working? And then it was like September. And I was like, oh, it's because I'm forcing him to stay inside and like learn with me. And so we were, how do we stay safe in public? We go outside and we go into nature. And it was a major personal and professional pivot for me that I realized how much learning can happen in nature, and I did not have to be in control of it anymore. And it was groundbreaking for me. And so I feel like I'm trying to still find my place in education. I am at a nature-based preschool now. But then my public school brain is always like, you're not doing enough. You should be doing more. And so this is just my 2nd year there. So I'm still trying to, like, I would say, navigate letting kids have autonomy and letting kids be in charge of their learning. And I know play is enough. So why do I get stressed out that, there's just those expectations by society that you feel trapped into and stuff. But yeah. And then just to April, I watched a ton of your podcast last year when my son went to kindergarten, and I was feeling very sad that he was going to be in the classroom and not outside because he had been at the nature-based program. And so I had gone to the principal and I got the PTO to meet with me about trying to create an outdoor classroom in his school. And so I had all your talking points all listed out in front of me that I was going to create all these things. And she was wonderful. She was happy to do it with me. I got turned down by the district. And so, and that's the hard part is, it kind of took all the wind out of my sails, and I'm realizing a year has passed and I need to pull my big girl boots back on and go back and say, here's why we need to do it. So I feel like listening to everybody talk, I'm like, man, I have all these questions being new to this, but also all these things of what I know with public ed. And I knew the reasons they were going to tell me no were going to be the reasons they told me no. And it's what they said. So I don't know if you create an advocacy group, man, put me in, because I want to get education and nature for all kids. And we need to stop reinventing the wheel and work together to make this happen.
Yeah. And one of the pieces there is like those talking, I can see us kind of creating a resource document where we could have talking points. Like we know what the objections are going to be. It's going to be money, space. It's going to be
standards, time. We have to do this much
Yeah.
time for each subject. We can't walk that far. I'm like, I knew
Yeah.
you would say that.
Yeah. And, and it's like, so it's almost like I could see having some sort of living advocacy document for people, community members, whether it's families or community members that want to sort of pitch the idea or, be that change maker for your community and not start from scratch. So years ago, I had reached out to Ray Picca, who I absolutely adore, and her book called Spark a Revolution. It's something like that. Ray Picca is a early childhood educator, but her last book is really about advocacy, and it's short, it's an easy read, but it's really a good one for those who want to advocate for something, like as a community member, and kind of learning the skill, because it's a communication skill of like how to, you're kind of pitching it and trying to sell it. But then that piece, like we talked about with Kathleen, when you have a group of parents who know the value of this and know the impact that it's had on their child, like that is a really good in. And so if you can combine some teacher interest, so it's not, some teacher interest, some community member, and kind of like inching it in. And yeah, so I would definitely, the nature-based advocacy group, I'll send a link. I don't know, I'll be in communication about that, but I think it's really important, and that we have tools, because it's like if each one of us is recreating that wheel of like, well, what would I talk to them about? But I can, I've got tons of articles already curated. It's like, if you want to talk about academics, here, boom, 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 boom. And like Ricardo said, we don't need to have a whole bunch of new studies done. We just need to like take the research that we already have and implement it. But
yeah, just a real quick other, like I'm in Omaha, so it's,
okay,
we're in the middle of the country and we're the only nature-based program in our state. And so that's the other part, is it's so isolating and it's so hard to find anybody. Like I look at Minnesota, just 5 hours down the road, I'm like, man, I'm so jealous. Like they've got 40 preschools that they can sit and network with. And that's the hard part, is not having all these people at your fingertips to work
Yeah.
together with.
But Minnesota wasn't always that strong, and
It's
so
true.
it just probably took, I mean, I don't actually know their origin story, but Minnesota's kind of known now for like, they have like within the Minnesota Department of Education, there's
Yeah.
resources. And it's like all of that started with one or two probably people that were like, not going to drop it. They just kept showing up and kept talking
Yeah.
about it. And that's that part of advocacy where it's like, we're stronger together, and so, there's probably other people not too far from you in Omaha who are doing the work but not calling it that. Or,
Right.
we do have a messaging problem because, Ricardo's the forest educator. I'm the nature inspired teacher. That's the name of my Facebook group. And that's kind of the term I use a lot. I use nature-based early ECE, NBECE, nature-based early childhood education. Like there's different acronyms, but it's kind of like getting people, not that we're trying to all be the same, but like that we're speaking a similar language. So,
Well, and I think holding nature in the same value. Like there's some
yeah,
programs in Nebraska that call themselves nature programs, but they're outside maybe as much as a public school. And so,
yeah,
you're like, well, you're not really. Like,
yeah. And
that's not true.
and that there is a good book that, it's a Rachel Larimore book, Evaluating Natureness. Pretty sure it's, I don't have the whole title in my brain, but that's a really good one for evaluating. So, actually it's Bailey. Anyway, let me think about that, see if I can come up with a title in a second. But we have one last person I want to make sure we have air time for, and that's our other Julia. Julia, thanks for hanging tight. We kind of run it over, but we want to definitely hear from you too.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll try to keep it. I'm like going to condense it to like 1 or 2 minutes if I can. So, I've been an outdoor educator for 9 years, and this is my 7th year of public school education. So I've been an outdoor educator longer. And, I worked at Wilderness Awareness School, which is the school that John Young co-founded, and he wrote Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature. And so like, as a public school educator, I'm feeling guilty sometimes about what I'm asked to do. And, especially for preschoolers, like, how you talked about how we're pushing things down. I was actually a first grade teacher 23 years ago. And I feel like preschool is like first grade now. Like,
yeah,
it's
crazy.
bad. Like, so anyway, my question is, and I love so much that the word advocacy and advocating is coming up so much, because that was my number one question is, are there any success stories in any public school in Vermont? I just need some inspiration. Like, are there any success stories in Vermont where someone advocated advocated for preschoolers in Vermont and made some kind of change or difference? Because I really need some inspiration.
Yes is the answer.
Okay.
Sometimes when I speak, I talk about things and then it's like, it's also not utopia here, right? Like it's not
Right.
that all program or all schools are doing this. One of the it's late at night now and my brain isn't firing on all of 4 cylinders or whatever's up there, but there's I'll get a name for you. There's
Okay.
see if I can find the recording of it, where a school district, not the whole district, but the whole school really embraced outdoor ed. And they, from the building principal to really thinking about like how, they spoke at our kindergarten conference in 2021 or somewhere in there. But this school, I've never gotten to visit them. I don't know them personally, but the principal like really got interested in it because the K1 teachers were doing it and they saw it as and then when COVID hit, had already been dabbling, I think a little. And then when COVID hit, they really shifted to this. And then they saw this huge gains in social emotional development. And so what they did is the principal really took ownership of it and really felt inspired by it. And because another one of the barriers that we didn't even mention in public schools is the schedule. Like many public schools, the day is so chopped up by either specials or lunches or, these transitions and like, and you're following like this grandiose master schedule, which can be really hard. But this principal, took and reevaluated the schedule so that there were these larger chunks of uninterrupted time. And so I find that story to be really inspiring. There's also a principal in Maine that shared their journey of like how they really transformed their school. So I think the real larger success stories where it's multiple grades doing it, it does come from having that full buy-in of the principal who can help us cut away a lot of the red tape and challenges that are there. So
Okay.
yeah, but
Thank
I'll see if I can find either of those, the one in Maine or the southern part of Vermont, as success stories. Yes, Kristen, there's some curiosities at what you're stabbing with. She's needle felting. Oh, she took her camera off. Yeah,
right.
she's not doing something.
I don't know what she's doing, but my back feels a lot better. So, anyway, I want to say to both Julias that it's really helpful to like we don't have to recreate the wheel, right? So if you are trying to advocate in your school, it's going to be hearts and minds and networking. And one thing that's really important is that I've seen people who are, especially people coming from like wilderness awareness school or wilderness, like the real wilderness skills background, is that they kind of go in, and I've seen this so many times. They go in and they go, oh, I don't like these fluorescent lights. Oh, I can't stand these cinder blocks. Oh, I can't stand all the primary. And they just like complain the whole time. And I'm just going like, you're not going to make it. Like you go work at a forest school where you just are in nature the whole time and just have fun. Do your thing. Like, yeah, you won't get paid very much, but you'll do your thing. You'll be able to hopefully have a good time. You have to have like an idea of it's going to take time to get to know the administrators, the PTO, the parents, who's who you need to know in the teaching body. And it really helps to look at other programs that have like videos. Like I just interviewed this guy, Manny Almonte, and he runs a program with boys and taking them out into the mountains and doing like these wilderness programs with them. And he had a film crew go out. They got a grant for like 40 grand. They got a film crew went out and made this like 15-minute or 12-minute film. And they're getting money from foundations who are just giving them money because they're like, oh my God, I saw your thing. We're inspired. Here's $70,000. Here's this, here's that. Like, because they see that and then they get the impact. And now we don't have to then turn around and go get a grant for that much money and have to recreate the wheel. We can use other videos that are going to do that. Just like Richard Louve's book, everybody went in with his book and went, hey, here, let's make changes. So we have to kind of like figure out a way to do it in the, a 10-minute, 12 minutes that you might have at a PTO meeting or something. And then really be able to listen to what the responses are and try to build a relationship. It's incremental. Like this system that you're trying to get into, it is established for like hundreds of years. And it goes all the way back to the Greeks, right? The classics. So it's not going to just disappear and flip over because you're like, I love nature and kids love bugs and it's better for them. Like it's just not designed to crumble that way. It's going to take a lot of time. So in my opinion, the best, if you're in school districts that just do not want to play, then just go, like say, hey, I'm going to take my if you guys want this landmark program that's going to be, seen and all these other schools are going to come see. If you don't want that, I'll go to a school that does, because I guarantee you there are principals and superintendents that are open to this because they're looking at it and they're seeing the big picture and going, these kids are going to be crazy in 5 years and we're going to have horrible outcomes. We need help. And if you're doing early childhood or whatever, I don't know what grades you're dealing with, but they're going to take a bite at that. So that's one of my things is just find those videos, find those TED Talks, and maybe there isn't a good one for what you want to do. So maybe we have to make a good one. I don't know, but
Right.
Yeah. And I think you're
Serious.
right. I think that that's part of that messaging and learning how to tell a compelling story. And, having a message that's in a video is sometimes like, I think about there was a documentary that David Sobel had put out a few years ago, maybe in 2018, called Best Day Ever. And um, it's a
That's
short
why
little,
I live here.
oh,
I watched that in Baltimore. I watched that as a nature-based course in Baltimore, and that's literally why I live here in Vermont now.
that's
All
great.
right, nice.
To do because I'm doing Forest Fridays because of that video. And one of the people that was in that video is a parent volunteer in my class now, because her daughter is in my, like, one of the women who was in that documentary as a teacher, her daughter is in my class and she volunteers in my Forest Friday classroom every week.
See, look at the power of video. So that's a story, Julia, that you should share with David Sobel. He will
Okay.
answer his emails, and yeah, he would love to hear that story.
Okay.
That's awesome. But I just think like we do have this, advocacy sounds like you're, always like with have a big sign and you're petitioning something. And sometimes that's what it looks like. But I think advocacy can look like a lot of different ways. And so finding those ways that kind of work for you. And I like what Ricardo was saying too, is it's like we also have to toe the line and know that, this has to be able, we can be passionate about it, but we also need to make sure that it's going to create an income for us, that you are able to not just feed your soul with this project, but that it feeds, puts food on the table, I guess.
It's got to be sustainable.
Yeah, and sustainable. And I think that sometimes that can be hard because we're not, many teachers or educators or nature people really don't have that business kind of background. And so I know that I've talked to Ricardo about that a lot, because I feel like he's in a position to help educators who are wanting to create businesses, to be able to learn how to write a contract or to be able to create a program, those kinds of things. Like, I think that's definitely a need that we have. And then the whole piece about grant writing, I think sometimes that it's like one more hat, that we're layering on top. And it can be like, when do we find the time for that? But grant writing for me has really meant being able to do things within my programs that I wouldn't, whether it's having, this, like, one year I had this amazing teaching artist come and work with my preschoolers, and we did this collaboration, and then we did a community event. Like, it wouldn't have happened without that, and I've written grants that have built gardens at different schools. And I just think that sometimes it's like holding the vision of what you want to have happen, and then needing to figure out the financial part of it, I think is really important. So I put in the chat, I'm going to I know we're way over now, but tomorrow I'll send out a post survey, and in there I'll put, if you're interested in like a nature-based advocacy group, and then kind of what time frame, like I'm thinking like maybe every other month or so, and what kind of topics are of interest to you. So I'm going to put it so that you can write as much as you want to in there, and so we can kind of gather some information there. And then also I'll put another question that asks, because many of you asked about sharing your contact information. So I'll put a question about, if you want to share your contact information, that might be name, email, social media kinds of things, if you have that, and people to follow you. And then you can answer that there, because I do feel that sense of like many of you saying like, this is what I need, I need this group. But I'm going to say those were my last words, and I'm going to let Ricardo have a few last words.
Can I just make a joke here?
Actually, Karen.
I was just on my phone looking at Victoria's Instagram, and on my Instagram, this article from the New York Times just came up, and it says, "Therapists trade the couch for the great outdoors." And it's about therapy sessions for adults in the outdoors.
That's awesome.
So I thought that was kind of serendipitous for that to pop up while I'm on.
That is very,
anyway, sorry.
No, that's totally fine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, the only thing I would want to respond to about it is just remember that because if you are trying to like make change in the public school, you can't you can't like build the Eiffel Tower in a day. Like you've got to lay the foundation. You've got to have the right people in the right places. And this is one of the areas that I think of when people go, oh, I want to do Wild Wednesdays or Forest Fridays. You've got to be really, really strategic, because if you go out and you do Forest Friday and everybody comes home with poison oak, now your program may be dead in the water. So if they all go out and they get leeches or they get covered in ticks or whatever, so you have to take baby steps, and you've got to prove yourself every step of the way that this is solid. And you just have to be really, really strategic about it if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to do that, if you're like, oh my God, that sounds like so much work, which is what I think. I think like, oh my God, if I had to like, if I was in Omaha and I was like, oh, I'm going to go in and talk, I just would be like, kill me now. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do all that work. But somebody's got to do that work, or at least try, and then maybe eventually figure it out. And I think at some point, if the schooling is if they're having a lot of difficulty, I mean, in 2017, it was 200 kids a day getting expelled or suspended in preschool. Now it's 250. Maybe when it's 400 kids a day or 500 kids a day, they're going to turn around and go, we need what you're doing. What can we do? So they will eventually come to us, but so we have to be really good at getting really good outcomes and getting that consistently. And that is not easy to do. So that's what we have to do, is like, whatever we're doing, try to document things. And again, get to know somebody who's a filmmaker, get to know somebody who likes to write grants. Like, just, you're going to have to get to know and build a network. If you don't have a network and you're just like, I'm an educator, I'm going to change the world. Like, there are no tribes of one person. So you have to have a network, which means you have to have a lot of friends, and those networks take 2 years, 3 years to develop in some cases. And it's not just your little circle. It's got to be people outside your circle that you're like, you should be scared to go talk to some people. Like I was like, that's how I am. I was executive director of this nonprofit. And I was like, oh, other executive directors were like, oh, you're a nonprofit. Oh, okay. I want to meet with you. And I'm like, uh-oh, am I in trouble? And I had to go and just start meeting people in order to like build those relationships. So anyway, I could go on, but
Yeah.
I would just say thanks a lot, everybody, for being here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all the nice words about the podcast too. Thanks.
Yeah, it's and Ricardo, we haven't put this out into the public yet, but I'm pretty sure it's the last Sunday of June. Ricardo is going to be over in my area, which is in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, which is pretty far from Omaha and some other places, not that far from Ontario. But on Sunday, June 30th, we're going to do a 1-day, Ricardo and I together, workshop, and it's going to really focus on really, we're kind of landing at all of the messaging that we're going to put out there, but essentially kind of like growing into this leadership role and also learning how to communicate with confidence. And so Ricardo's coming over to do some timber framing with this regenerative agricultural project with a goat farmer that I adore. And he's doing that for a few days, and then he's going to stay. And on Sunday, June 30th, we're going to do that program together. So I'll have it in my newsletter, which most of you guys, or all of you, I think, are on. But thanks so much for being here. And I really, I know that this work is hard, yet it's so worth it, isn't it? So,
yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for everything you're doing.
Yeah.
Anybody, you can contact me anytime if you want to. Like, please find me on Instagram or Facebook or anything, and just send me a message if you like. So,
and I'll put that in the post. Little people want to fill that out, and then I'll have a quick turnaround time of a few days, and I'll make sure all of Ricardo's contact information is on there too, so you have it. All right. Thanks so much.